Power isn't about commanding other people. It's about commanding yourself. And you see leaders now, they struggle with that. Influence can corrupt. Privilege can erode integrity. About 2,000 years ago, a Roman emperor faced that same test on the grandest scale. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize that, and you find strength." That was his secret. So this is a framework for exercising influence without losing your character. It comes from his private journal. We'll look at how he redefined power as a duty, not a prize, and the Stoic tools he used, the inner citadel, the view from above, to stay grounded when everyone else bowed down. How did a man with absolute authority practice more self-restraint than most people with none? By the practical ones to apply in your own sphere. Whether you lead a team, a family, or just your own life, what does it mean to be truly powerful in a world that often rewards the opposite? Marcus Aurelius didn't see the throne as luxury. It was duty. That's the shift. The scepter wasn't about what he could take. It was about what he had to give. He wrote to himself, "At dawn, when you don't want to get up, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What is there to complain about if I'm doing what I was born for, the things I was put here to do, or was I made to huddle under blankets and stay warm?" So he framed his whole day, all that power, as a job, a necessary service. It separates the external role, the title of emperor, from the internal character you need to do it. The Stoics had a term for things like titles, wealth, power. They called them indifference, not good or bad in themselves. Their moral value comes from how we use them. A crown used to exploit is corruption. The same crown used to protect lives becomes service. It's the character of the person wielding it that determines everything. Marcus reminded himself of this constantly. To avoid the trap of entitlement, he writes in his meditations, "What is not good for the swarm is not good for the bee." He saw himself as part of a larger organism, the Roman people. His well-being was tied to theirs. His power was for the health of the whole, not for his personal comfort. You can contrast that with so many leadership failures now, where the position is treated as a personal reward, the executive using company funds for personal gain. The official who sees public office as a means to privilege, not a platform for public good. Those are failures of philosophy, not just ethics. They come from seeing power as a possession. Then look at leaders with a duty-first mindset. They are often quieter, less focused on the trappings of the office, more focused on the outcomes of the work. They show up not to be served but to serve. This principle scales down to any position of authority you might hold: manager, teacher, parent, even someone with influence among friends. Ask yourself this: do I approach this role mainly as a duty I must fulfill for others, or as a privilege I get to enjoy for myself? The answer reshapes every decision. It turns power from a corrosive force into a constructive one. That was the foundation of Marcus Aurelius's restraint. He built his entire reign on that simple, demanding idea. Marcus Aurelius, before he ever led an army, believed his first command was over his own mind. That's the inner citadel. The Stoics saw the mind as a fortress, a place of complete security, a place you rule yourself and nothing outside can ever break in unless you let it. For an emperor, surrounded by flattery and threats and constant demands, this wasn't just a philosophy. It was survival. Real power, he said, doesn't start with controlling others. It starts with mastering the chaos inside yourself, your judgments, your fears, your immediate reactions. If you can't govern that inner territory, you have no business governing anything else. He wrote it down. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize that, and you find strength. And he gave a practical method. People look for retreats in the country or by the coast, but that's unphilosophical, he said, when you can retreat into your own mind at any moment. Nowhere is more peaceful, nowhere is less crowded, so his ultimate sanctuary wasn't a palace. It was this inner citadel. He would withdraw there to examine his own impressions, to question whether his anger was justified, to separate the raw event from his judgment about it. That's the foundation of self-restraint. Think of a modern leader in a crisis. A financial scandal, a product failure. One leader with a weak inner citadel reacts immediately. They lash out, they blame someone. They make a panicked decision to cover it up, driven by the impulse to protect their image. And the damage spirals. Now picture a leader who's practiced this retreat. They feel the same initial alarm, the same pressure, but they pause. They retreat into that mental space of clarity. They ask, what's actually in my control here? What is the event separate from my fear about it? What action would actually serve the people I lead? From that calm center, they can respond with measured honesty. Take responsibility, guide the situation toward resolution. The event was the same. The difference was the state of the inner fortress. So the practical question is, what does your inner citadel look like right now? Is it a well-maintained fortress where you can retreat for perspective? Or is it a noisy, undefended town where every passing worry storms the gates and takes command? Your daily practice is the maintenance. It starts by identifying one reactive impulse you need to better command. Maybe it's the flash of irritation when someone interrupts you, the urge to defend yourself when criticized, the anxious pull to check the news for the 10th time in an hour. The next time that impulse arises, that's your moment of command. Notice it, pause, and consciously choose not to let it dictate your action. That small act of self-rule is how you strengthen the walls. It's how you build the only kind of power that can never be taken from you. You can look out from that quiet inside yourself, see things differently, picture the Roman Empire from way up above. Rome is just a little dot, roads like tiny threads. Legions moving like lines of ants, that's the view from above. Marcus Aurelius did this every day. It was how he fought the ego that comes with absolute power. He wrote that you can drop a lot of useless trouble by holding the whole of existence in your mind, the whole of time. Think of how big time is, how big space is, and how small your piece of it really is. He wasn't saying life doesn't matter. He was looking for the right scale. When you see your own life, your power, your problems as one small part of this ancient, huge cosmos, it shrinks your pride. It quiets the anxiety. Your urgent crisis from that height becomes a manageable event. Just one thing in a long story. That perspective built a deep humility in him. He'd remind himself he'd be forgotten soon. Everyone who praised him would be gone too. Even the empire would turn to dust one day. That wasn't morbid. It was freedom. It meant the pressure to build a perfect, immortal legacy that was an illusion. His job was just to do his duty well today, inside the vast flow of everything. A modern leader who loses this gets stuck in the drama of the moment. A bad quarterly report feels like a catastrophe. A harsh headline feels like a permanent stain. They operate from a place of frantic, short-term ego defense. But if you apply the view from above, the calculation changes. That business setback becomes one data point in a journey of decades. That political conflict is just one chapter in a community's long story. It doesn't make the problem unimportant. It frames it accurately, so you can address it with calm effectiveness, not panicked pride. Try it on a current worry of yours, whatever's causing stress or feeding your pride. First, zoom in. Acknowledge its real impact right now, then consciously zoom out. See your street from a satellite. See your city, your country, the planet spinning in space. See the century you're in, and all the centuries before and after. From that vantage point, how does the size of your concern shift? Does it feel less like a world-ending event and more like a challenge to be met with clarity? That shift is the core of self-restraint for anyone in power. It stops the small self from confusing its temporary role with the grandeur of the universe itself. And from that humble, spacious point of view, your next action gets much clearer. Marcus Aurelius didn't want more power. He wanted to use the power he had well. That's the discipline of desire. It's a reorientation, a complete shift in what you want. For the Stoics, virtue is the only true good. Wisdom, justice, courage, self-control. Everything else, wealth, fame, comfort, even power itself, they called preferred indifference. You can prefer them, you can work for them, but you can't hinge your happiness on getting them. Because they're not truly yours to control. What you can control is your character, your actions, so you shift your deepest desire away from the rewards of a position and onto the right use of that position. Marcus wrote to himself, he said, "Are you distracted by outward cares? Allow yourself a space of quiet, learn of some good thing, and cease your wandering. You wander when you desire things outside your control." He caught himself wanting the easy applause, the comfort of his palace, relief from constant duty, and he would correct that desire, gently, firmly. He'd ask, is this want aligned with my role as a leader? Does it serve justice? Or is it just a personal craving, a craving for ease, for recognition? That internal dialogue, that's the practice. Think of a modern executive faced with a choice. Their company could land a massive contract, lucrative, but winning it would require cutting corners or misleading a partner. The desire for the win is powerful. For the bonus, for the market praise, it feels like success. A leader without this discipline sees only the prize. They rationalize the compromise. A leader who has practiced wanting what is right, they pause. They ask a different question, not how can I get this, but what would it mean to earn it with integrity? They might walk away from the deal entirely, or renegotiate it on honest terms, even at a lower profit. In the moment, it looks like a loss, but internally, they've satisfied a deeper desire, the desire to act justly. They find a quiet satisfaction in that alignment, a profound one which no bonus check can match. That's the subtle power of this discipline. It doesn't make you passive. It makes you fiercely active, pursuing the only thing that can never be taken from you, your own moral integrity. So, look at one area of your life where you hold some influence. However small, identify one desire there that feels misaligned. Maybe it's the desire for everyone to like you, which leads you to avoid difficult truths. Or the desire for a quicker result, which tempts you to take a shortcut, a questionable one. Just notice that desire, then gently ask yourself, what would it look like to redirect that energy? To want instead the clarity of speaking honestly, or the solidity of building something the right way, even if it takes longer. That small shift in what you want, that's where real self-command begins. It turns the perks of power from a tantalizing goal into mere side effects of doing your job well. Marcus had this one question he would filter everything through, every decree, every judgment. Is this for the common good? That's the discipline of action. It goes with the discipline of desire. You get control over what you want inside, so you can point what you do outside toward one thing. The welfare of the whole. For him, wielding power wasn't about imposing his will. It was about aligning his actions with justice for the community he served. And that principle, it limits selfish action. If every move has to pass the test of common benefit, then vanity projects, petty revenge, corrupt favors, they just fall away. They don't even make it to the drawing board. The Stoics had a concept for this, sympathy. The interconnectedness of all rational beings. We're all part of one system. Like limbs of a single body, hurt one part, you hurt the whole. Help one part, you strengthen everything. Marcus wrote to this directly. He said what brings no benefit to the hive brings no benefit to the bee. And elsewhere he reminded himself, you were born for fellowship. Your actions shouldn't be like a gladiator fighting alone, but like a limb or an organ that cooperates with the whole body. To act otherwise is to rebel against nature itself. so his power was an extension of that cooperation, a function he performed for the health of the entire organism. Rome, it transforms power from a possession into a function, a tool for service. Think of a modern manager. They have a choice between two paths. One project makes them look brilliant, secures a promotion, but it stretches the team thin, burns people out. The other project is less flashy, more collaborative. It builds the team's long-term skills and morale. A manager practicing this discipline chooses the second path without hesitation. Their action is filtered, not by what gets me ahead, but by what strengthens the group I'm responsible for. They might get less personal credit in the short term, but they've used their authority as it was meant to be used, as a limb serving the body. The reward is the health of the team itself. That's the real legacy. So bring this down to a decision you made recently, at work, in your family, with friends. When you chose that course of action, what was the dominant filter? Was it primarily about a personal advantage, convenience, credit, comfort, control? Or was it guided by a genuine consideration for the benefit of the group involved? The answer isn't about judging yourself. It's about noticing the default setting of your choices, and that awareness is the first quiet step toward redirecting your power, toward making it a force that builds things up rather than just propping yourself up. Marcus didn't view the petitions, the wars, the constant plots as interruptions. He saw them as the material, the actual substance of his duty. That's a shift. He wasn't waiting for the hard parts to end so he could be happy. The hardship was the job. The Stoics had a term for this, amor fati, the love of one's fate, not resignation, an active embrace. Everything life hands you, the good, the bad, the tedious, the terrifying, to weave it all into your purpose. For a leader, that's the antidote to resentment. Marcus wrote about this. He said, when you don't want to get up in the morning, remind yourself you're rising to do the work of a human being. What is there to complain about if I'm doing what I was born for? And in another place he wrote, accept your tasks as a soldier accepts a post, willingly, without complaint. This wasn't about enjoying every moment. It was about accepting the nature of the role he had chosen, or the role fate had given him. The emperor's peace wasn't found in the absence of conflict. It was found in the full engagement with it. Think of a nurse on a long night shift, the alarms, the discomfort, the emotional weight. They could see it as a series of exhausting interruptions, or they can see it as the core of their calling, the reason they are there. By accepting the night's challenges as the material of their duty, they don't just endure it, they find a deeper purpose within it. Their energy shifts from fighting the reality to working skillfully within it. This applies to any position of responsibility. A parent doesn't opt out of sleepless nights or difficult conversations. That is the material of parenting. A project manager doesn't bypass the budget crises or the personality clashes. That is the material of bringing a vision to reality. The frustration comes from believing your role should be easier, cleaner, more rewarding than it actually is. Amor fati asks you to drop that story, to look at the unavoidable difficulty and say, this too is part of my path. This is what I signed up for. So take a moment, look at your own sphere of influence, identify one unavoidable recurring difficulty. Maybe it's the demanding client, the administrative paperwork you find tedious, the necessary but uncomfortable feedback you have to give. Now, instead of resisting it each time, practice this acceptance. See it not as a nuisance derailing your day, but as the central challenge of your role, the very thing your skill and character are meant to engage with. When you stop fighting the nature of the work, you conserve an enormous amount of energy you can then pour into doing that work with more grace, with more effectiveness. This is how Marcus carried an empire. He didn't try to make the burden lighter. He made his spirit stronger by embracing the burden itself. The applause, the jeers. Marcus Aurelius didn't let either mean much. For someone with that much power, that might seem impossible. but it was his main defense. Against the vanity that praise can bring and the insecurity that blame can create, the Stoics drew a line here between what's ours and what isn't. Our actions, our judgments, our intentions, we control those. The opinions of others, their reactions, their applause, we don't. Marcus wrote about this to himself. He said it never ceases to amaze him that we love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. He saw the absurdity in that, and he worked to fix it. His goal wasn't to be cold, it was to anchor his sense of worth to an internal compass, not to the shifting winds of public favor. That's cognitive detachment. You notice the praise, you hear the criticism, but you refuse to let either dictate your self-worth or change your course. Epictetus, who Marcus studied, put it bluntly: if someone tells you a person speaks ill of you, don't make excuses. Just answer, he was ignorant of my other faults, or he would have mentioned those too. That reframes blame, turns an attack into a piece of data, maybe irrelevant, maybe it shows a blind spot you can work on, but it doesn't have to be a verdict on your character. Now, two modern leaders, one governs by daily polls. Their policies shift with the latest focus group. Their mood soars with good headlines and plummets with bad ones. Their authority is hollow because it's leased from the crowd. It's exhausting and it doesn't work. Then, a leader who listens to feedback but whose decisions come from a deeper principle. They might launch an unpopular reform. They might uphold a standard when it's easier to look away. They'll face criticism, but because their peace isn't tied to being liked, they can endure it. They can stay the course long enough for the wisdom of the action to become clear. This scales down. A manager who only gives easy assignments to be liked, not the challenging ones that help their team grow, is chasing praise instead of doing their duty. A parent who makes rules based on a child's immediate approval, not their long-term well-being, is doing the same. The need for external validation corrupts authority. So, your own experience. Can you recall a moment where praise made you swell with pride that felt unearned, or where criticism landed like a physical blow and ruined your day? That's the hook, that's the signal. In that moment, the Stoic practice is to pause, to acknowledge the feeling, and then to ask a separating question. Is this opinion about me, good or bad, within my control? The answer is always no. Then ask, what is within my control here? Only my own understanding of the event and my next right action. That simple move creates a space, a buffer between the world's noise and your inner citadel. It lets you receive feedback without being defined by it. To accept a compliment without letting it distort your self-image. This detachment isn't indifference to people. It's the ultimate respect for your own capacity to choose. To wield whatever power you have with a hand that doesn't shake, whether it's being stroked by applause or slapped by scorn. Each day started and ended with a private conversation. That was the final discipline, the morning review and the evening review, a way to turn passing days into a lesson in self-control. In the quiet before dawn, Marcus would get his mind ready. He'd picture what was coming, the difficult meetings, the endless demands, the temptations to slip into laziness or anger. He'd remind himself of his principles. Not as philosophy, but as a personal code. He'd ask, what do I need today? Patience, courage, justice. He was setting his intentions, aligning his actions with virtue before the day could pull him away. Then at night, he'd come back to that quiet, not to count wins but to audit his conduct, honestly. Where did I fall short? When was I irritated instead of reasonable? Did I mistake what I wanted for what was right? That made a feedback loop for his character. Power without that daily check is like sailing without a compass. You drift on mood and circumstance, and eventually you're lost. You can see this practice right in the meditations. The book is really just those reviews. One entry says, when you wake up, tell yourself, the people I meet today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant. They're like that because they can't tell good from evil. But I've seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and the wrongdoer has a nature like mine, so they can't hurt me. No one can drag me into ugliness. I can't be angry at my relative or hate him. That's the morning preparation. An evening note might be simpler. Just, you're better than this. Don't let your impressions run away. It wasn't about punishment, it was calibration. For someone with ultimate authority, there was no higher court, so he became his own strict judge to stop the small corruptions from building up unseen. What does that look like now? You don't need an hour, you need 2 minutes. In the morning, while your coffee brews or you commute, ask one thing. What's the one principle to guide me today? Maybe it's patience or thoroughness or kindness. Keep that word in mind as you start. Then at night, brushing your teeth or lying in bed, ask the evening question. Did my actions today align with my character? Not my to-do list, my character. Be honest but gentle. If you snapped at someone, see it. The goal isn't guilt. It's awareness. That awareness, done daily, builds an ethical immune system. It keeps the power you have over a project, a team, your own choices clean through reflection. It's the simple, steady practice that turns philosophy into integrity. Try it tonight, just one sentence. Ask, did my actions today align with my character? The answer, whatever it is, becomes the start of a better tomorrow. The Germanic tribes at the frontier, they weren't just enemies to Marcus, they were his trainers. They trained him in resilience, and that's the core of a Stoic idea. The obstacle is the way. Any challenge, any setback, any external difficulty, it's not a barrier to your purpose. It's the material your purpose is meant to work with. For a leader, that reframe is essential because power can make you soft. It creates an expectation of ease. An expectation that your way will be cleared, and that expectation is a trap. It makes you brittle. The Stoic sees the opposite. Adversity is the gymnasium. It's where you build the muscles of your character: courage, patience, wisdom, resilience. These virtues don't grow in a vacuum. They need resistance to develop. Marcus wrote about this in his private journal. He said the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. And in another passage, he lists what he's grateful for. He thanks the gods for giving him relatives and friends who were difficult. Why? Because they gave him practice in tolerance and patience. He even thanks his own bad health for forcing him to moderate his habits and focus on his mind. He saw his entire reign, the constant wars, the political strife, as one long training session. His power wasn't a shield from hardship. It was the context for a greater test, and that inverts the common reaction to problems. Most people in authority see an obstacle and think, this is preventing me from doing my job. The Stoic leader thinks, this is the central feature of my job. This is the specific event that requires me to be a leader. Think of a modern executive facing a sudden market crash. The easy reaction is panic, blame, retreat. The obstacle is the way thinking asks different questions. How does this crisis force us to innovate in ways we've been avoiding? What dormant strengths in our team does this situation require us to activate? How can I model calm and creative problem solving when everyone else is fearful? The market crash hasn't changed, but its meaning is transformed from a threat to survival into a necessary catalyst. A catalyst for growth and team cohesion that comfort could never have produced. It becomes the way to build a better, more adaptable company. So bring this to your own sphere. Look at one current obstacle in your life, a difficult person at work, a tight deadline with limited resources, a personal goal that keeps hitting snags. Now, instead of seeing it as a wall, see it as a training apparatus. Ask yourself, what specific virtue does this situation invite me to practice? If it's the difficult person, the practice is patience and understanding. If it's the tight deadline, the practice is focus and resourcefulness. If it's the repeated snag, the practice is perseverance and creative thinking. Name the virtue, then for just one day, approach that obstacle not as something to defeat, but as your chosen coach for that quality. The challenge doesn't disappear, but your relationship to it shifts from adversarial to purposeful. You stop wasting energy fighting the fact of the difficulty, and you start channeling energy into the person you become by engaging with it skillfully. That's how you use power or any responsibility, not to avoid life's friction, but to let it polish you into someone more capable and more grounded than you were before. Marcus had a skull on his desk. It was a tutor, a reminder, Memento Mori, remember you must die. For someone with the world at his command, it was a grounding mechanism. To meditate on the fact that all of it, the titles, the triumphs, the breath in his lungs, was on loan. It strips power of that intoxicating feeling, the feeling of permanence. It reveals status as a costume, something you wear for a brief scene. He wrote about this. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, what you say, what you think. And he wrote elsewhere that Alexander the Great and his mule driver both ended up in the same place, united in death. This wasn't about fear, it was about liberation. By facing the transience of everything, including his own reign, he was freed from that desperate, clawing need to make it last forever. That desperation is what corrupts. A leader who believes their power is permanent will do anything to keep it. They'll compromise principles, silence dissent, cling to office long after their service has ended. But the leader who holds their authority lightly, knowing it's temporary, can wield it more justly. They can make the hard choice for the long-term good, even if it costs them the position. Because the position was never truly theirs to begin with. It was a duty assigned for a season. Think of a CEO who knows their tenure is limited, maybe by a planned retirement. That awareness can focus them. They're less likely to chase short-term stock bumps that harm the company's future, more likely to mentor a successor, to invest in sustainable practices, to build a legacy that outlasts them. The ticking clock isn't a threat, it's a clarifier. It asks, what will matter after I'm gone? Now bring this to your own sphere. What title or achievement do you find yourself clinging to? The promotion you worked for, the respected role in your community, the identity as a provider, a creator, an expert. Take a moment, write it down in your mind. Now reflect on its temporary nature. Imagine, not with fear but with calm curiosity, a time in the future when you will no longer hold that title, when that achievement will be a line in a forgotten record. How does that change your relationship to it right now? Does it make you want to grasp it tighter, or does it free you to use it more generously? This contemplation shrinks anxiety. Anxiety about losing face, losing position. It redirects your energy from protecting your status to perfecting your service. The goal shifts from being remembered to being useful while you are here. That's the profound humility this practice cultivates. You stop playing for the applause that fades. You start building for the impact that endures, however quietly, in the lives you touch. The skull on the desk wasn't a symbol of endings. It was a tool for beginning each day with clear eyes and a heart focused on what actually matters. For Marcus Aurelius, an unjust act was worse than losing a war, a military loss you could come back from, but injustice that corrupted the ruler's soul. And through him, the state itself. That's why justice was the central virtue for him. It wasn't just another quality, it was the base, the thing that made any use of power legitimate at all. The Stoics had a simple definition for justice, giving each person what is due to them, what they're owed by nature, by their place in the whole network of society. It meant working fairly inside that web of relations, from a senator down to a laborer. This turns the idea of the common good into something you do. It turns a good intention into daily vigilance, vigilance against your own bias, against favoritism, against the slow temptation to use cruelty because it's easier. Justice asks you to see people as they are, not as tools, not as obstacles. In his writings, Marcus walks himself through this. He says to look at the thing itself, the thing behind the appearance, and take it apart. Ask, what is its nature? What is it made of? What caused it? He's telling himself to see past the surface, past a person's rank or a situation's pressure. To see the core truth of what's fair. He applies this to his own anger. When someone irritates you, he writes, ask what notion of good and bad makes them act that way. If you see that, you'll feel pity, not surprise or rage. That pause for analysis, that search for understanding, that's what drives just action. It stops a snap judgment based on irritation. You can see it in history. A leader inherits a system with a deep flaw, a law or practice that helps one group by hurting another. The easy path is to leave it alone. To not rock the boat, to enjoy the stability it gives to the powerful. The just path is to fix it, even when fixing it brings fierce resistance from those who benefit. That requires the leader to see the injustice as a moral failure, not a political one. Their duty isn't to the comfort of the powerful, it's to the fairness owed to everyone. They have to act knowing they'll be criticized, knowing they might lose support, because the foundation of their rule demands it. This scales down to any place you have some sway. In a workplace, justice could be making sure credit goes where it's actually due, not just to the loudest voice. In a family, it might be applying rules the same for everyone. Listening to each person with equal respect. The practice is in the constant calibration. So look at one area where you hold some influence, your team, your class, your home. Ask yourself, where is there one small, habitual imbalance? A place where convenience or habit or an unconscious bias leads you to give someone less than they're owed. Maybe it's always giving the tedious work to the same reliable person without extra thanks, or it's brushing off a younger person's opinion too quickly. Find that one point, then make the conscious just correction. Give the credit openly. Listen with full attention. That single act, repeated, rebuilds the foundation of your authority on something solid. Not on fear or favorites, but on fairness, and that's how you lead in any context without losing your way. Marcus used a quiet phrase in his campaigns. The Stoics called it a reserve clause. I will do my utmost, but I accept the result. It's a kind of footnote you add to any plan. It separates your effort from the outcome. For a general, this was sanity. You can position your troops, you can study the ground, you can rally your men, but you can't control the weather or the enemy's spirit. Or a single arrow, to stake your entire peace on a victory you can't guarantee. That's a path to agony or to desperate, reckless choices. The clause builds a floor, a base of acceptance under all your striving. You can pour everything into the action, but you hold the result lightly. Epictetus said it plainly. He was a former slave. Marcus studied him. Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. What happens, he said, is for the universal nature to decide. Your job is to steer the ship, not to command the sea. That changes where you find your satisfaction. Winning is fickle, but doing your work with excellence, that's entirely your own. Think of a leader today launching a product. They build a great team, they do the research, they fund the development, they do everything in their power. But the market might shift, a competitor might surprise them, public taste could change. A leader without that clause ties their self-worth to one outcome. Market domination, if it fails, it's a personal catastrophe. They might blame the team, hide the data, keep pushing a sinking ship out of pride. A leader with the clause does the same excellent work. But they hold the result with open hands. If it succeeds, they're grateful. If it fails, they're ready to learn, to adapt, to pivot. Their core isn't shattered, because it was anchored in their effort, their integrity, not in the trophy. The effort was theirs. The trophy was always on loan from fortune. This is the answer to the tyranny of expectation. That frustration you feel when things go wrong, it often comes from a hidden demand, a demand that the world follow your plan. The reserve clause removes that demand. It says, I will act with all my skill and heart, and I will welcome whatever reality gives back to me as material for my next right action. So take a goal you're anxious about now. A promotion, a difficult conversation, a project you're about to share. First, define your utmost. What does your best effort look like? What's fully within your control? Preparing thoroughly, speaking with kindness, polishing the work to your standard. Commit to that completely. Then consciously add the clause, and I accept that the final decision, the other person's reaction, the public's reception, these are not mine to command. This doesn't weaken your resolve, it fortifies your spirit. You can step forward not with a clenched fist of need, but with an open hand of capability. Ready to give your best and ready to meet whatever comes next with clarity, not despair. Marcus felt the suffering of his people. He didn't drown in it, though. There's a line there between real sympathy and just collapsing into sentiment. The Stoics had a word for this, for rational care, oikoiosis. It means seeing others as part of the same community. Of reason, we're connected, so their well-being matters, but your own emotional state, it shouldn't be held hostage by their condition. Marcus wrote that down. Be tolerant with others, he said, and strict with yourself. In another passage, he draws the distinction. When you're distressed by something external, he says, it's not the thing itself. It's your judgment about it, and that judgment you can erase it. In an instant, he applied that to his own grief, to the hardship he saw. His compassion was active. A force for aid, not a passive state of shared misery. Think of two leaders facing a crisis, a natural disaster. The first leader gets swept up. They visit the site, they weep with survivors. They feel each loss personally. Their heart is in the right place, but within weeks they're exhausted, despondent. They can't make clear decisions. For the long recovery, their compassion, untempered, it burned out its own fuel. The second leader visits the same site, sees the same pain. They listen. They offer comfort, they mobilize resources right away, but internally they keep a calm center. They separate the depth of the event from the turbulence in their own spirit. That lets them return to the command tent, to sleep, to eat, to think strategically about rebuilding. For the next 5 years, their help is sustained. Precisely because it isn't consumed by the moment's despair. That's the Stoic balance. Feeling for others doesn't require feeling as they feel. It requires understanding their need and bringing your whole, composed self to the work of meeting it. So, reflect on one relationship where you're a source of support, a friend in a difficult season, a family member facing illness, a colleague under stress. When you offer help, where is your inner footing? Are you stepping into their emotional world so completely that you absorb the chaos, leaving you drained, less capable of showing up tomorrow? Or are you offering a steady presence from a place of calm understanding, able to listen deeply without taking on the turmoil as your own? The goal isn't to build a wall, it's to build a pier, a solid structure you can walk out on, to reach them without falling into the turbulent water yourself. That's how sympathy becomes sustainable, how concern over a lifetime doesn't lead to bitterness, but to a quiet, enduring strength. The emperor's greatest power was often his silence. In the roar of the Senate, with advisors debating, petitioners pleading, Marcus Aurelius would listen. He absorbed the full scope of a situation. Then his voice, which carried the force of law, would shape it. This wasn't passive, it was restraint, a discipline. In a position where every word could start a war or ruin a life, choosing not to speak was an act of strength. Profound strength, it was wisdom in motion. The Stoics saw wisdom not as knowing all the answers, but first as knowing the right questions. And you can't hear the questions, the real tensions, the hidden fears, if you're filling the air with your own certainty. This practice counters the corruption of power. Power often shouts first and thinks later. Epictetus, the teacher Marcus studied, warned about that impulse. He said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak." and in his meditations, Marcus reminded himself to be slow to speak and quick to hear. To let the first draft of his reaction pass without giving it authority. Imagine a modern manager walking into a team meeting. There's tension. Two departments are blaming each other for a missed deadline. The easy, power-fueled response is to step in immediately, to assign blame based on the loudest complaint, to lay down a decree that might create a temporary, fearful quiet. But it solves nothing, it just buries the real problem. Now picture that manager practicing this stoic silence. They enter the room and say, "I need to understand." They let each side speak without interruption. They ask clarifying questions, not leading ones. They watch the body language. They listen for what's not being said, the resource shortage no one wants to admit, the unclear process causing confusion. In that space of attentive silence, the real issue often surfaces on its own. The team members, feeling heard, start to lower their defenses. The manager's eventual decision, when it comes, isn't a rash verdict from on high. It's a targeted solution born from deep understanding. It has weight because it was earned through listening. This principle scales to any conversation where you hold influence. A parent listening to a frustrated child, a friend hearing a partner's concern. The next time you're in such a discussion, make this your single practice. Your only goal is to understand the other person's position completely before you form or express your own. Suspend your internal rebuttal. Quiet the voice in your mind preparing its defense. Just listen to their words, their tone, the emotion behind it. You might find the entire dynamic shifts. The need to assert your power diminishes. And a more genuine form of authority, one built on respect and comprehension, quietly takes its place. Marcus saw the same spark in a field slave and a senator. It was the same divine reason. This wasn't just a nice thought, it was Stoic physics. The universe runs on a rational principle, the logos, and because every person has a mind, they share in that logos. So at their core, all people are fragments of the same universal intelligence, brothers and sisters in reason. That belief cuts the arrogance of high office right at the root. If the same divine fire is in everyone, then your title, your wealth, your ancestry, those are just costumes. The real value, the shared human dignity, is identical. Marcus wrote himself a daily reminder. He'd say, when you wake up, tell yourself, the people I meet today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant. They're like that because they can't tell good from evil. But I've seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and I know the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own, not the same blood or birth, but the same mind. A share of the divine, so none of them can hurt me. No one can drag me into ugliness. I can't feel angry at my relative or hate him. We were born to work together. Like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. To act against each other is contrary to nature, and to be angry, to turn your back, that is acting against them. That passage is his operating manual. It moves from observation to understanding to a command for cooperation. He's programming his mind to see past the annoying behavior, down to the shared rational core underneath. And from that vision, respect isn't an option. It's a requirement of natural law. To disrespect someone is to disrespect the logos itself, the fragment of the divine within them. Now picture a modern leader who lives this. They walk through an office, a hospital, a construction site. Their demeanor doesn't change based on the title on the door. They give the same attentive listening, the same basic courtesy to the intern getting coffee as to the board chair. That consistency shows character. It shows their respect isn't a transaction traded for status. It's a principle granted because of a shared humanity. The person who fawns over superiors but snaps at subordinates, their respect is for the position, not the person. Their character is hollow, built on shifting sand. Marcus's view builds a character of granite because it's tied to something unchanging. So here's a simple practice for your next interaction. A meeting, a customer service call, a family dinner. Before it starts, remind yourself of this Stoic truth. The person you're about to engage with, no matter their role or how they act toward you, has the same capacity for reason, for suffering, for joy that you do. They're your fellow limb in the body of humanity. Then go into the interaction and offer the basic respect that truth demands. Listen fully, speak without condescension. See them, not their role, not their utility to you, but the human being. Notice if your tone or attention wavers because you see them as higher or lower in some hierarchy. That noticing is the start of real freedom from the arrogance that power can bring. The mind can get crushed under the weight of an empire, dwelling on the past or fearing the future. Marcus Aurelius anchored himself in the now. That's the final discipline of action. The past is just memory. The future is imagination. The present moment is the only real territory. It's the only place you can plant your feet, exert your will. For a leader, this is a practical tool, a way out of paralysis. Anxiety is almost always about a future you can't control. Regret is a prison built from a past you can't change. Both of them steal your energy. They take it from the one place where you can actually do something. The present. Marcus wrote to himself about this constantly. Do not let the future trouble you, he said. You will come to it if you must, bringing the same reason you use now. To meet the present, and Seneca had this observation, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The mind, left alone, will spin tragedies, elaborate ones about what might happen. It will replay old scenes, failure, shame, and in all that spinning and replaying, the actual work of this hour goes undone. The present moment is the only sphere where power can be exercised. Virtuously, because virtue is an action, it's a choice, and choices only happen now. You can't be courageous tomorrow. You can't be just yesterday. You can only enact those qualities in the immediate moment. The moment of decision. This focus prevents the two great corruptions, procrastination, which is the fear of a future outcome, poisoning your present effort, and grandiose planning, which is the seduction of a distant, perfect vision. It detaches you from the messy, necessary work right in front of you. A leader staring at a 5-year plan can feel overwhelmed. The scale is immense, the variables are countless, the temptation is to freeze or to get lost in endless revisions, revising the plan itself. The Stoic approach is different. They look at that plan and ask, what is the single next right action I can take today? Not to complete the plan, but to move one honest step toward it. That step is small, it's manageable, it exists wholly in the present. Maybe it's having one clarifying conversation with a key team member to review one set of data. With full attention, to draft the first paragraph of the proposal. By fully engaging with that one step, you build momentum. You also ground your leadership in reality. Not in abstraction. The future plan is a guide, but your power is only ever exercised in the now. So here's a practice, a direct application. For the next 5 minutes, set everything else aside. Your past mistakes, your future worries, your lengthy to-do list. Choose one simple, present task. It could be replying to one important email with thoughtfulness. It could be organizing your desk. It could be simply sitting and breathing, focusing only on the sensation of air moving in and out. For those 5 minutes, let your entire world contract. To that single point of engagement, notice how the anxiety about what comes next softens. Notice how the regret about what came before loses its grip. You are here, you are acting. This is where your power lies. The emperor would sometimes sleep on a hard bed, eat simple soldier's food by choice. It wasn't a punishment. It was training. The Stoics called it ascesis, voluntary discomfort. For a man who could have anything, this was how he reminded himself. His body, his mind, they didn't need any of it. His strength, his peace, they weren't tied to silk sheets or elaborate meals. It was a kind of vaccination, against the softness that absolute power can create. When luxury is constant, it builds a quiet expectation, the expectation that life should be easy. That discomfort is a problem to fix, not a reality to face. That expectation is a trap. It makes you fragile. A minor inconvenience starts to feel like a crisis. Marcus wrote about this temperance. He said very little is needed for a happy life. It's all within you, in how you think. And in another note, he observed how quickly luxury turns into necessity, how the mind invents needs where there aren't any. His voluntary hardship was a way to break that chain, to prove through action that his comfort was optional, not essential. That kind of practice builds character in a way theory can't. It creates an inner callous, not a hardness toward others, but a resilience against the friction life brings. You can think of a modern leader, a successful entrepreneur. They could be driven everywhere, but sometimes they choose to take the train or fly economy on a short trip. It's not about the money. It's about staying connected to the ordinary experience. Remembering what it's like to wait, to be in a crowd, to not have every detail arranged for your comfort. It stops the bubble of privilege from warping their perception. It keeps their decisions grounded in the reality most people live. Another modern version is the digital detox. A CEO, someone whose life is full of screens and alerts, chooses a weekend offline. In silence with a book or just with their thoughts. That voluntary removal of constant stimulation, that's a form of ascesis. It strengthens the muscle of attention. It reminds them that their worth, their ideas, they don't come from an inbox. They come from somewhere deeper, quieter. So here's a challenge. This week, choose one small, voluntary discomfort. Safe and a conscious choice, not something forced on you. It could be a cold shower for 1 minute at the end of your routine, skipping your morning coffee, leaving your phone in another room for an evening. The point isn't the act itself. The point is to watch your reaction. Notice the initial resistance. The little voice that says you don't want to, that you deserve the comfort. Then do it anyway, and afterwards, ask yourself what you learned about your dependencies. Did you survive? Were you stronger for having done it? That moment of observation, that space between wanting ease and choosing resilience, that's where you add another stone to your inner wall. You prove to yourself you're not a slave to your conditions, and that is a form of power no one can take from you. Marcus saw his role not as imposing his will, but as taking part in a universal order of reason. The Logos, the Stoics believed the cosmos wasn't some chaotic accident. It was a living, intelligent system, governed by a rational principle. Everything in it, the stars, the seasons, the human mind, all of it operated by this shared divine reason. For a leader, that changes everything. Your task isn't to invent rules from nothing. It's to discover the rational principles already there, woven into reality, and to align your decisions with them. Justice, fairness, duty, these aren't just good ideas. They're expressions of the Logos itself. To rule from whim, to act from selfish passion, that's not just bad politics. It's a rebellion against the nature of the universe. You're putting your small, irrational self above the cosmic order. Marcus wrote about this alignment. He said, "Everything harmonizes with me which is harmonious to you, O universe. Nothing for me is too early or too late which is in due time for you. Everything is fruit to me which your seasons bring, O nature. From you are all things, in you are all things, to you all things return." That's the voice of a ruler who hears himself as one note in a vast, rational symphony. His goal is to be in tune. That perspective shapes a certain kind of decision-making. Fair, because reason demands impartiality. Logical, because the cosmos itself runs on cause and effect. Principled, because principles are the language of the Logos. It pushes back against the tyranny of mood. A leader having a bad day might want to lash out, cancel something in frustration, reward a flatterer. But if they pause and ask what would a rational principle dictate, here the path gets clearer. The personal emotion recedes, and the larger framework of what's reasonable, what's right for the whole system comes forward. Think of a modern executive facing unnecessary but painful change, merging departments, ending an old product line. The easy, emotional path is to avoid it. Delay because you fear the conflict, the hard conversations, the dip in morale, or to execute it brutally with a cold efficiency that ignores the human cost. The leader aligned with the logos approaches it differently. They frame it as a rational adaptation for the health of the whole organization. They gather data. They listen to stakeholders to understand the full impact. They communicate the why with clarity, explaining how this change fits the long-term mission, the health of the company. They implement it with respect for the people involved, offering support, a transition. The decision is still tough, but it's made from reasoned necessity, not from fear or indifference. It seeks to bring the organization back into harmony with its changing environment. So take this to a decision you're weighing, something personal, professional. Before you choose, ask that simple Stoic filter. Is this action aligned with reason and the greater good, or is it being driven mainly by an irrational emotion? A flash of jealousy, a spike of anxiety, a craving for validation, or by a narrow, selfish interest that ignores the wider network you're part of? Just asking the question creates a space. A moment to step out of the small story of your own wants, and to consider how your choice might fit into a larger, more rational pattern. The goal isn't to become a cold calculator. It's to let the warmth of your compassion be guided by the light of reason. That's how you participate in the order of things, instead of struggling against it. The biggest danger for someone in power might not be an open challenge. It's the quiet agreement of people around you, the echo chamber. When you're in charge, people begin to say what you want to hear. Not what you need to hear, and that flattery, it feels good. It supports your choices, it eases your worries. It creates this comfortable space where your ideas always seem right. But that space is a trap. It cuts you off from what's real. Marcus Aurelius faced this constantly. As emperor, so many people, courtiers, senators, governors, their fortunes depended on his goodwill. They had every reason to agree, to applaud, to tell him he was wise. The Stoic response to that wasn't to distrust everyone. It was to be brutally honest with yourself, and to deliberately find people who would be honest back. He wrote about the risk of public opinion. He reminded himself that the crowd's applause means nothing, that the only approval that matters is your own, based on acting with virtue. But he didn't stop at his own thoughts. He built criticism into his system. He kept the philosopher Junius Rusticus close, appointed as his teacher and advisor. Marcus gave him clear permission, even the duty, to speak bluntly, to correct him, to point out his mistakes without fear. He writes with thanks about Rusticus, says he learned from him to read carefully, not to be satisfied with just the surface of an idea. That's a subtle point. It's admitting that even an emperor with all his resources could be shallow. He needed someone to push him deeper. That practice flips the power structure. Instead of sitting at the top of a pyramid where information is filtered to please you, you put a trusted critic right next to you. Their job is to pop the bubble, to say, wait, have you thought about this other outcome? Or, I think your anger in that meeting wasn't fair. Or, this popular plan might actually hurt the people you're trying to help. Now think about two leaders today. One works in a classic echo chamber. They promote yes men. They see disagreement as disloyalty. Meetings become performances of agreement. Over time, their decisions get more erratic, more detached from the facts on the ground, because the feedback loop is broken. They're slowly poisoned by comfortable lies. The other leader does the opposite. They actively build what's been called a team of rivals. They bring the smartest, most principled critics they can find into their inner circle. They ask for the worst-case scenario. They reward honesty even when it hurts. This leader's decisions are tested before they're made. Their power stays connected to reality, not fantasy. So here's a question for you. Look at your own world, whatever its size. Who is the person in your life right now who tells you honest, uncomfortable truths? Not someone who's just negative or harsh, but someone who cares enough about you and the truth to risk upsetting you. It could be a colleague, a friend, a partner, a family member. Can you name them? Then consciously value that relationship. See it not as friction but as a kind of gift, aligned to reality. The next time they give you a difficult truth, instead of getting defensive, try saying thank you. Practice listening not to argue back but to understand. That one act of welcoming criticism is a deep exercise of self-command. It protects the most fragile part of anyone with influence, the part that starts to believe its own story. Marcus Aurelius was at the height of his power, and he still thought of himself as a student of Stoicism. That was the thing that protected him from the most subtle kind of corruption, the idea that you've arrived, that you know enough, that your wisdom is complete. For a Stoic, self-mastery is an endless project. There's no final exam, there's no diploma, it's just the daily practice, trying to be more rational, more courageous. To stop learning is to stop growing. And for a leader, that stagnation is where decay begins. You can see this in the fact that he kept a private journal, the Meditations. He didn't write it for publication. Not for glory, not to teach other people. It was a personal workbook, a record of his daily study, his struggles, the reminders he needed to give himself. He was his own most demanding teacher, grading his thoughts every night. He wrote things like, "Throw away your books, stop letting yourself be distracted." That wasn't a rejection of learning. It was a command to internalize the lessons, to move philosophy from the page into his life, to stop collecting knowledge and start living it. This mindset, this growth mindset, it comes from humble study, and it prevents the arrogance of believing your current understanding is enough. The world changes. New challenges come up, old solutions fail. If your mind is closed, you become a relic. You end up ruling by outdated instinct. Think of a modern leader who carves out time for learning. Despite a crushing schedule, the CEO who blocks an hour each morning, not for email, for reading history or science, the manager who finds a mentor outside their industry, someone who can challenge their assumptions, the public official who convenes a diverse council, not to rubber-stamp decisions, but to genuinely probe and question. These aren't signs of weakness, they're acts of strength. They signal a confidence that's secure enough to admit it doesn't have all the answers, that there's always more to understand. In contrast, the leader who believes they have nothing left to learn, they often surround themselves with flatterers. Their world shrinks, their decisions become brittle. Resistant to new information, they confuse the authority of their position with the authority of truth. So here's a simple step. This week, commit to learning one new thing. Deliberately, not casually. It could be reading one essay by a Stoic philosopher you haven't explored, Seneca or Epictetus. It could be studying a skill you've been avoiding. Something relevant to your role, a basic understanding of data analysis, or the principles of nonviolent communication. Frame this not as adding another task, but as an exercise in humility, an acknowledgement that your journey isn't over, that your capacity to lead, to influence, to live well, it expands precisely to the degree that you remain a curious and dedicated student of the world and of your own evolving character. Marcus Aurelius could have had anything. He wanted very little. That was the point. He built a taste for simplicity, and that simplicity became a kind of power. If you don't want much, the world can't really hold you hostage. Usually, power makes you want more. It tells you that you deserve more, that your position requires a bigger show, that getting things is your right. Marcus fought that expansion every day. His restraint wasn't about saying no for no reason. It was about clearing the field, taking away the clutter of material wants so he could see his actual duty. A leader who's obsessed with getting things, better palaces, finer food, more tribute, starts to see their role as a way to get those things. The state becomes a tool for their own consumption. Justice bends into taking what you think you're owed. By simplifying his desires down to the essentials, Marcus cut that link. His authority could never be bought with a luxury he didn't even crave. His decisions were never fogged by a calculation for personal gain. There's a quiet part in the Meditations where he writes it down. He says, "This living thing we call life, it's plain and simple. Anyone can live it. The earth gives you berries, some spring water, a pile of straw to sleep on. Everything else is extra." He wasn't telling everyone to live on berries and straw. He was running a thought experiment on sufficiency. He was reminding himself, the emperor in purple robes, that at the most basic level, his needs were the same as a farmer's. And if those basic needs were met, everything else was preference, not necessity. That realization is a deep kind of freedom. It means your happiness, your sense of enough, is under your control. It can't be threatened by losing external things you never really needed. You see this in modern figures, the billionaire who drives a normal car and lives in a modest house. The famous artist with a spa studio, focused entirely on the work, not the signs of success. They aren't punishing themselves. They've identified the clutter that distracts from their purpose, building a company, making art, and they've removed it. Their simplicity isn't about lack. It's a declaration of independence from other people's opinions, from the treadmill of consumption, from the anxiety of maybe losing what they have. Their power, their creativity, flows more freely because it isn't being drained into maintaining a complicated life. So take a quiet moment. Look at your own life, at what you want. Pick one thing: a newer device, a more expensive car, a bigger home. Now ask honestly, could I do without it? Not as a punishment, but as a question. What would change if you just let that want go? You might find a space opens up, space that was filled with the noise of wanting, now free for clearer thought, for better connection, for deeper work that actually matters. That released desire is a weight you put down, and every weight you put down makes you more agile, more resilient, and much less likely to use whatever power you have chasing things you never truly needed. He gave his life to Rome, knowing some would curse his name. His response was philosophical. It's maybe the ultimate test of restraint, when the people you serve, the ones you've sacrificed for, turn on you. Or they just fail to show the gratitude you think you deserve. For a leader, that sting is constant. The employer you mentored leaves for a competitor and speaks poorly of you. The community you helped resists your next project. Marcus Aurelius expected this. He built it into his view. The Stoic sees people not as they should be, but as they are. Flawed, often confused about what's good, acting from their own limited perspective. When someone is ungrateful, when they betray a trust, it isn't a shocking break from human nature. It's a confirmation of it. Our job isn't to be surprised by that or wounded by it. Our job is to meet it with a steady character. Marcus wrote to this pain directly. He said, when you wake up, tell yourself the people you meet will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant. They are like that because they can't tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and I know the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own, so they can't hurt me. No one can drag me into ugliness. I can't be angry at my relative or hate him. We were born to work together. Notice the sequence. He names the behavior. He diagnoses the cause, a kind of moral blindness. He asserts his own understanding, which insulates him, and he ends with the fundamental connection that makes hatred irrational. That's equanimity in action. It's a mental protocol for disarming bitterness. Think of a modern leader betrayed by a close colleague. The colleague takes credit for shared work or leaks information to undermine them. The immediate, visceral reaction is personal. It feels like a deep wound. The desire for revenge, to expose them, to ruin their career, can be overwhelming. A leader using Marcus's framework would feel that sting. They would, but then they'd engage that protocol. They'd see the act not first as a personal attack, but as the colleague's own error. A failure of judgment, a confusion about what success really is. From that commonplace, their response changes. It's no longer about emotional payback. It becomes about upholding a standard. They might address the breach directly and fairly through the proper channels. They might protect the project and the team from more damage. But they would refuse to let the other person's poor character dictate their own. They wouldn't become consumed by plotting a counter-betrayal. Their energy stays focused on forward motion, on their duty, not on the drama of the slight. That's how you wield power without being poisoned by it. So reflect on a recent moment where you felt slighted or unappreciated. Maybe a friend forgot a kindness, or a coworker dismissed your idea without consideration. Before the story of personal disrespect takes root, pause. Try on the Stoic lens. Could this be less about you and more about the other person's current state? Their distraction, their insecurity, their simple lack of understanding. This reframe doesn't excuse poor behavior. It just places the responsibility for that behavior where it belongs, with them. And it places the responsibility for your response firmly and peacefully with you. The Stoic emperor didn't separate his philosophy from his rule. It wasn't just ideas for discussion. It was the work itself. Every decision, every moment of patience was applying a principle. For Marcus Aurelius, Stoicism was the operating system, not decoration. His power had integrity because of that unity. Hypocrisy was the ultimate failure of leadership. It's when your actions drift from the values you state. Then your authority becomes hollow. People see the disconnect. They stop trusting your words. Marcus wrote the Meditations to prevent that drift. It's not a theoretical book. It's urgent commands to himself about how to act in difficult situations. He writes, "Do not be overheard complaining, not even to yourself. Or when you wake up, tell yourself the people you meet will be meddling." He's programming his responses, bridging the gap between knowing what's right and doing it in the moment. Think of two leaders. One speaks eloquently about transparency and teamwork, gives inspiring talks, but in private they hoard information. They play team members against each other. Their philosophy is a performance, disconnected from how they actually operate. The second leader might speak less about their philosophy, but their daily choices reflect it. They share credit openly. They admit mistakes in meetings. They listen to junior staff with the same attention as senior executives. Their power is authentic, built from that congruence. Their actions are the proof. That unity turns philosophy from a noun into a verb. It becomes something you do. So here's a challenge. Review the principles, the inner citadel, the view from above. Action for the common good, accepting obstacles as the way. Pick one, just one idea. Then identify a concrete decision you'll need to make tomorrow. How you handle a difficult email, how you run a meeting, how you respond to a frustration. Before you act, pause. Consciously apply that single principle. If you chose the view from above, ask how this decision looks from next year. If you chose action for the common good, filter your choice through what benefits the whole team, not just your convenience. This is the practice where philosophy stops being a spectator sport and starts building the character of your leadership. Your power gains integrity, one aligned choice at a time. Marcus lived with this constant awareness that death could take the purple from him at any time. It wasn't a dark fixation, it was a kind of lens. The Stoic idea, Memento Mori, remember you must die, it acted as an equalizer for him, a motivator. It cut straight through that illusion of permanence that power tends to create. When you know the curtain's going to fall, you stop performing for an audience that won't be there. You start acting for the integrity of the play itself. That awareness built a real urgency in him, not a frantic hurry but a focused determination to use his limited time, his vast authority, for what was actually good. All the posturing, the status games, the political theater, from that perspective it just seemed like noise, childish noise. Why build a legacy of marble statues when you yourself are made of dust? The only legacy that made any sense was a legacy of right action, justice served, duty fulfilled. He wrote one of his most direct passages on this: you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. And in another, he framed death not as an end but as a natural transformation, like a ripe olive falling from its branch. Praising the tree that bore it, thankful to the branch that held it, that image it dissolves fear, replaces it with a sense of completion, gratitude. For the role you were given, however brief, for a leader, this mindset is a powerful tool against procrastination, against pride. The bureaucrat who delays a decision to avoid risk, the executive lost in building their personal brand, they're acting as if they have forever. The leader who remembers their time is finite, acts with a different courage. They make the tough call today. They prioritize the meaningful reform over the popular gesture. They speak plainly because there's no time for obfuscation. They mentor a successor because the work has to outlast them. Think of a project with a hard deadline 6 months out. The final week is always the most focused, the most efficient. Distractions fall away, petty conflicts seem trivial, the team zeroes in on the essential outcome. Memento Mori is about bringing that final week clarity to every week. It asks, if this endeavor, this role, this phase of your life had a definite expiration date, how would you spend the time? What trivialities would you abandon? What courageous conversations would you finally have? What small, selfish concerns would you let go of for the sake of the larger purpose? So pose that question to yourself now. If you knew your current role or project would definitively end in 6 months, how would you change your approach to make it more meaningful? Would you stop worrying about who gets credit and start focusing on what gets done? Would you finally address that lingering inefficiency everyone ignores? Would you make sure the people you work with feel seen and valued? The answer isn't about making drastic life changes. It's about injecting that clear-eyed, deadline-driven focus into your ordinary days. Using the certainty of the end to give weight and direction to your present actions. That's how mortality, remembered not with fear but with understanding, becomes a source of immense power. The power to act with intention right now while you still can. Marcus had the legions, they obeyed him, but his real authority was over his own choices. That's what the Stoics called proherses, our faculty of choice. It's the inner citadel, the one place nothing outside can ever really take unless you hand it over. And all the practices, the morning review, the view from above, they're just exercises for this, for mastering that one sovereign power, the power to choose what we think about things. And how we respond. Epictetus taught this. He was a slave who became a teacher, and Marcus studied him. Epictetus laid it out. He said, some things are up to us and some things are not. Up to us are our opinions, our desires, our aversions, what we do. Not up to us are our bodies, our property, our reputation, our command, the things that aren't our own actions. That's the split, the line between what's truly yours and what fortune has just lent you. Marcus was emperor. He commanded the greatest empire on earth. But by this split, his command wasn't truly within his power. It could be gone tomorrow, from rebellion or illness or chance. What was irrevocably his was his proherses. His capacity to meet whatever happened, with courage, with justice, with wisdom, that could never be taken, and that inverts the usual idea of power. We see the person giving orders as powerful. The Stoic sees the person who has mastered their own judgments, who isn't jerked around by every external event. That person has a deeper authority, an unassailable kind. Think about two people. The first is a political leader. They're captured, imprisoned, stripped of title, comfort, liberty. But in that cell, they choose to keep their dignity. They choose to treat their captors with a calm respect. They use the solitude to think, to write. To fortify their spirit, they have this profound inner freedom, even while their body is confined. Now picture a second person. They're physically free. Wealthy, influential, but they're a slave to their own passions. A harsh email ruins their whole day. A social slight sends them into resentment. The need for constant approval dictates every move. They have all the external trappings of power, but internally they're commanded by every passing whim, every slight. So who is truly more powerful? The Stoic answer is clear. The one who commands themselves. You can bring this to your own life. Pick one external thing you complain about: the traffic on your commute, the demands of your job, the frustrating behavior of a colleague. Just pause and perform the split. Acknowledge the external fact, the thing not within your power. The traffic exists. The job has demands. The colleague acts that way. Then shift your focus to what is within your power. Your judgment about this. Is it a personal affront or just a condition of the world? And your response. Can you choose to listen to an audiobook in the traffic? Turn lost time into learning. Can you frame the job's demands as the material for building your skill? Can you respond to the colleague not with matching frustration, but with a calm clarity? That shift of focus from the unchangeable external to the sovereign internal. That's the moment you reclaim your power. It's the practice of the emperor, and it's accessible to anyone in any circumstance. Your command begins not with changing the world, but with choosing how you will meet it. Other emperors built these huge arches. Marcus built his legacy in his journal and in the justice of his rule. His monuments weren't marble, they were moments of restraint, decisions for fairness, the quiet discipline of a leader who knew that what you build in stone can fall, but what you build in character lasts. The Stoics had a radical view on this. They said the only thing that truly lasts, the only thing with real weight, is virtue. A good character, because it's the one thing you carry with you, and it influences others in a chain you'll never see the end of. Grand buildings celebrate one person's power. A just reign strengthens the character of a whole society. That was the legacy Marcus wanted. He wrote about the emptiness of chasing fame. He said, in one of his most direct passages, that fame is just a lot of people talking about you. Then he asked himself a piercing question: what is even eternal remembrance? Utterly nothing. He wasn't saying our actions don't matter. He was putting them in the right scale. Striving for a name that echoes in history is a fool's errand, because history itself fades. But striving to act with integrity today, that has a value that's complete in itself. It needs no future audience to validate it. That focus was his final check on imperial vanity. It's why he spent years on the grim Danube frontier, managing a plague and a war, instead of being in Rome commissioning statues of his victories. His legacy was the peace he secured through perseverance, not the parade he might have thrown. You see this in modern leaders who understand the difference. Consider a founder who steps down from their company, not at the peak of its market value, but when they've successfully embedded a culture of ethics and innovation. Their legacy isn't the stock price on the day they left. It's the operating system of integrity they built into the company's DNA. The way it treats employees, its environmental stance, its commitment to quality over shortcuts. That legacy outlives them. It guides decisions made by people they've never met. In contrast, a leader obsessed with personal branding, with having their name on buildings and awards, often leaves behind an organization that collapses without their forceful presence. The monument was themselves, and it was fragile. So bring this to your own sphere of influence, however large or small. When people remember you in your current role, what quality of character do you most want them to recall? Not the title you held or the projects you completed, but the way you were. Was it your unwavering fairness, your calm in a crisis, your generosity with credit? Your patience as a teacher? Pick one, just one quality. Then, for the next week, let that chosen trait be the filter for your actions. In every interaction, ask silently, is this how a person remembered for fairness would act? Is this what a calm leader would say? This practice turns legacy from a distant concept into a present-day blueprint. It builds your monument not from external materials, but from the substance of your daily choices. And that is a structure no tide of time can ever fully wash away. Power was never just a test for Marcus Aurelius. It was the gym, the place where his character got built day after day through practice. His reign shows that self-restraint isn't a limit on power. It's the strongest form power can take. It stops influence from becoming corruption. It turns authority into a kind of service. We've looked at the disciplines that made this real, the shift from seeing privilege as a duty, the retreat into your own mind to command yourself first, using justice as the filter for every single action, and then anchoring all of that effort in the present moment, because that's the only place you can actually live with virtue. These weren't abstract ideas, they were his operating system. He wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." That's the call. It moves from theory to practice, from admiration to actually being it. Your own sphere of influence, whether it's leading a country or a team or just a single life, that's your arena. That's your gymnasium for these same disciplines. So the question is, looking back on this, which principle resonated most? Duty, the inner citadel, justice, something else? Where do you feel called to start?